name's Sean McNichol. I'm the head of growth at Gigged.AI, and I'm joined by Rich, who is the CEO and co-founder. And Rich is going to be doing a bit of a talk for us today, all about the AI talent gap. So if you haven't seen already from all the things that we've been putting out, we've just recently launched this brand new report, which we've been working on for the last few months, which is based on a load of research we've done with about 300 senior tech leaders, speaking to them all about how they're dealing with rising skills demand, particularly for AI skills, data, and how they're going about preparing their workforce for that big transformation that's happening. So Rich is going to dive a bit more into that report in just a second. Rich, you're going to speak for about half an hour, I think, and then we've got about 10 minutes at the end for any questions if anyone's got any. I think we should have the Q&A feature enabled on Zoom. So if anyone does have any questions as we go, if you just pop it in there, that'd be great, and we'll do our best to get through things at the end, depending on time. And with that, Rich, I guess I'll just hand over to you.
Yeah, perfect. Look, we're obviously delighted to work with the Data Lab on this in terms of we should have planned this on purpose. We didn't, but it turns out that this month is the Data Lab's Community Talent and Skills Month, in the same month that we released a big skills report. So we got our act together and we worked together. So thank you to everybody for joining. As Sean said, I'm going to run through 25-30 minutes in terms of some of the key findings. Obviously, if you do want to have a full report, look at the report. It's free. You just need to take a picture of the QR code and that'll take you through, and you can get access to the full. There's QR codes right through this, Sean, right? So if you miss one, don't worry, you won't miss them all. And the report, I've got to say, Sean and his team led it. The report is something that we're really, really proud of. It is definitely worth the read. As I said, I'll be going over 64,000 feet level, but it's definitely worth the read. It's not a sales pitch. It's not a manifesto. It's based on real data that's going on in the UK at the moment. This isn't the US. This isn't anything else. This is about what's going on in the UK. I'm open to any questions. I'd love to answer any questions as we go at the end. So as I said, I'm going to run through this and then we'll leave plenty of time for questions. In terms of why we're interested in this, I was actually on the skills board for the Data Lab many years ago. I was a recruiter before that, and obviously Gigged.AI is a skills-based hiring platform. We work with enterprises to be able to assess what skills they have now, being able to match them to their internal skills, and be able to allow them to have access to external skills really, really quickly. So we're passionate about skills, but one of the things we really wanted to do was really look at what is going on in the UK just now. There's a World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report recently, worth a read. Some amazing data out of that, but it doesn't really look at what's going on within the UK. And in the UK, there are some very specific things going on at the moment which are impacting. Some government related, some macroeconomic, some culture related. There is a lot going on. So we really wanted to look at how's skills-based hiring being used, how is generative AI being used, and what impact it's having on the skills conversation as we go. We wanted to know various things. We worked with an outside research company, which I'll touch in a second, but we wanted to see, is the Gen AI hype real? Are companies actually embracing Gen AI, and how? How are companies harnessing what skills they have? How are they able to look at what skills they have and match to internal talent and tap into different talent pools? Obviously, I mentioned the work the Data Lab do with the PhD and the Master's program. That's a great way to fill skill gaps for organisations. Big organisations in Scotland, JP Morgan, Barclays, use that to fill skill gaps on an intern basis. There's lots of different ways to do it. And then we wanted to understand about what businesses are concerned about this year. All the research was created by a company called Sapio. We've worked with Sapio for the last couple of years. Really, really good bunch, very data focused, and are able to access a wide range of companies. We really wanted to talk to mainly technology, finance leaders in various sectors. And we really wanted to understand what was going on. So we went out to 300 leaders with companies at 250 plus in organizational size. They said the vast majority of the companies we spoke to had 1,000 or so employees or more, and it was manager or above level. Not that we're not interested in what other people don't want to say, but we really wanted to focus on the people who are actually making the hiring decisions, that are actually involved in the skills conversation. So in terms of where we're at just now, is there an AI skills gap? I think we already gave the answers to the test that there is, but let's kind of dig in about how bad it actually is. So this correlates with the future jobs report that I mentioned with the World Economic Forum. AI and machine learning. And again, a lot of people are putting it as one skill. It obviously isn't, right? And I think this is some areas where we really need to look at skill frameworks and really create, one of the things we talked about at the Transform meetup 2 weeks ago, that Python is not a skill. That became the soundbite of the whole session. Now, Python's not a skill if you adopt a certain framework, but if you adopt other frameworks, it is a skill, right? And that's a big thing that we realize, is that we need more commonality around what frameworks and what skill frameworks are being used. I seen that was a post on the Data Lab community a few weeks ago. What frameworks are people using for data scientists? The Sophia version 9 framework is a pretty good one, right? It's worth checking out if you haven't already. But the long and short of it is that companies are really struggling around AI and machine learning skills. And it's skills that they say that they need and they think they need, but they do not have those skills, mostly in-house. And I say mostly because we'll come back to that in a second. So again, a lot going on in this slide, but I think it's really important. We wanted to look at 3 key verticals, and this is quite pertinent to Scotland. Within energy, finance, and technology. We didn't look too much within public sector, because that's another report, I think, in itself, because how public sector are tackling skill gaps and how private sector are not the same at the moment. So we looked at these 3 sectors, and I thought the energy sector really confirmed what you would probably think, is that the most in-demand skills are data analytics within energy teams. And it's not that far behind within financial services. So when we say finance, we mean financial services. And then, AI and machine learning is just behind data and analytics. And then we've seen a rise out with energy within IT, infrastructure, networking, and cloud computing is also on the rise. And again, it's all linked to what's been happening in the last 10 years around digital transformations and companies taking on huge digital transformation programs. A lot of them failed. 67% of digital transformations have been delayed because they didn't have the right access to people, and the rest failed because they weren't aligned to business priorities. So we're seeing those digital transformations morph into AI transformation or Gen AI transformation. Still digital transformation in my eyes. It's just a different way to do it. It's just a different technology that is driving it. But the core concept still needs to be the same. What is the business challenge you're trying to solve? Is AI actually the answer to that? And then what type of AI, right? As I said, if you're working in AI, you'll probably be as annoyed as everybody else that AI has become this kind of general catch-all term for everything. And again, I think that's where a skill framework is going to be really important in the future. So in terms of we look at the IT department and where the skill gaps are facing, again, no huge surprise here. When we did this research about 18 months ago, software engineering was number 1. Data and analytics was number 4. Cybersecurity was number 2. So cybersecurity has stayed number 2. And I don't see that changing. But interestingly, the AI machine learning aspect of it has jumped up from number 4 to number 1. And I don't think that's a huge surprise at all. Actually, I don't want to pretend I'm clever, but I did predict that. If anybody watched the session that I'd done 18 months ago, we said that it was going to be AI machine learning was going to be the number 1 skill gap that companies were going to face. And that has proved to be the case. And we're seeing a lot of the other skills still in demand, but kind of where you'd expect it to be. So in terms of the skill gap, 48% think they'll be using Gen AI within, somewhere in their business in 2025. Yeah, and I think that's probably it's probably at the lower end of the scale. I think whether it's official use of generative AI or whether it's what we used to call at Gartner, ghost IT or shadow IT, which is people using their own software and their own devices without the company knowing. I think again, it's hard to get access to that data, but I think that is very much the case. And then according to IBM, 40% of companies are going to need to reskill. I think that again, that's probably in the lower end of, I think every company is going to look at their skill base and is going to look at how do they upskill and reskill their workforce, because how we are working is changing, and there are jobs that are going to change. Like the data analysis role has changed. Data scientist role has changed. Does it mean that you don't need a data scientist and you're not going to need those roles? Absolutely not. But the tasks are changing all the time. And that means people, whether you're an experienced practitioner or whether you've just, you know nothing about AI, there is a huge opportunity to upskill and train people. 92% of businesses are upskilling or say they're upskilling within Gen AI. I think there is a real mix of quality and a real mix of how this is, right? I think it's one of those things everybody says they're doing it, but how deep is the quality of it? There's some good companies out there like Caps Lock and the Data Literacy Lab that are, that are doing a lot of good stuff around training and support of this, but there is a lot of kind of on the cheap pay. Here's a certification online on generative AI, and then you tick a box and said how we've upskilled. So I think there is definitely a view that companies need to adopt upskilling and reskilling. But again, is the quality as high as it needs to be? I think is a question that we'll figure out over the next 12 to 18 months. Really interesting that people we asked them this, they said they expect their teams could be 4 hours per week more productive. Now, when we done the session a few weeks ago in Glasgow, there was some people that were quite shocked by that, shocked by how low it was and shocked by how high it was. I think it's just about right. But I think there was also a feeling, well, does that mean what happens with those other 4 hours? Does that mean people are sitting with their feet up? I don't think so, right? But I think it allows you to focus on higher priority tasks, focus more on creative thinking. Again, if you're a leader, I've been fortunate or unfortunate to be in a leadership position for nearly 20 years now in one aspect or another. The feedback I've always had in every role I've been is, Rich, you need to give yourself more thinking time. You need to be able to step back and be able more time to think about where you're going as a leader. And actually give yourself time to think. I've had that feedback so many times. For me personally, I've used a lot of different generative AI tools to automate a lot of things that I don't like doing. Bid applications, for example, RFPs. Doesn't do the whole thing, but it definitely claws me back time. I think I've saved about 8 hours a week. And again, what I use that time is to take a step back and think about the business and think about where we're going. And I think there is a huge positive there if it's used in the right way. Again, our organization's skill power as they think. In short, no. Again, if you're really interested in skills and interested in what's happening at large organizations, I would recommend this book. It's really looking at the taskification of jobs and how jobs are matched to those tasks. And I think that is a huge part of what skills-based hiring is. And I also think this is where we really need to be thinking now in the future when we think about work. Work is a combination of tasks. And we need to think about what tasks can be done by an AI agent, let's say, what task can be done by a human? And then does that human need to be a full-time employee? Could that human be a fractional employee? Could that be a crowdsourcing model? There's lots of different ways you can start. When you start thinking about breaking jobs into skills and tasks, there's lots of benefit you can get. It's not a one size fits all, and it's not a silver bullet, but there's a huge opportunity here. But only far less than half of organizations thinks they're actually taking a skills-based approach. Most organizations don't know what skills they've got in their organization, and they don't know how to harness them. And this is a big, big opportunity. And I think this is one of those opportunities in, I don't want to say, in the last 100 years, but it's a huge leap for us to think about how work is done and actually change the skills and the tasks that we have focused on. The traditional 9 to 5, the traditional permanent employee, we can think about things differently. There are different ways to work. There are different ways to get work done. Are we going to still need humans? In my belief, yes. I'm not of the belief that we're just going to have a marketplace full of AI agents and we don't need humans anymore. I'm not of that belief. But I am of the belief that more and more companies will look to become skills-based. And as they look to become skills-based, they will then look to taskify work, and then they will look to match those tasks to different talent pools. And those talent pools will be a combination of people and agents. I firmly believe that. The first step in becoming skills-based, in our opinion, is you need to know what skills you have. Most are still doing this in an Excel spreadsheet. It's a place to start, but it should always be a start and not the end. There are better ways now to track what skills you have and be able to match those skills to tasks. But most companies, especially the companies we speak to, who tend to be larger organizations, are still manually tracking how they do skills. Most organizations do not know what skills they have in that organization. And they don't know how much those skills are improving. One of the things I talk about a lot is, so I won't name him, but there's a guy I know, and he is a procurement manager at an energy firm. Innovation procurement, but he's in procurement. He has done over 200 certifications within generative AI. His organization did not know that, right? Because there's no way for him to be able to share. That's what he's interested in. He's got an interest in upskilling into generative AI, that he's taken his own time outside work to pay for courses, to pay for things that is improving his skill set. If you're an organization, he knows your organization, he knows how they buy, but that organization is going out and trying to hire generative AI consultants from high-paying consultancies when they actually have someone in-house that knows the business, that's interested and passionate, and actually has upskilled themselves. That's when you start to think about how crazy it is. How many people in an organization actually have a skill set or an interest or upskilling themselves? And that didn't happen 10, 15 years ago that much. But with LinkedIn and how they push training and how NVIDIA, Microsoft, everybody pushes free training, people are upskilling themselves. How do you know what they're doing? And then how do you help them develop? There's a very good chance if he gets offered a generative AI job somewhere else, he's going to take it. Because the organization that he's in just now don't see him as a generative AI person, even though that's a skill that he's developing. Again, no huge surprise, there's not much that companies have done yet in this space yet. Skills is becoming much more focused within the chief information officer, chief technology officer, and the chief data officer. The days of those people just leaving all of their hiring and skills management to HR, I believe, are over. Not anything against HR, but I do believe that leaders now want to own the skill conversation, and they want to really own it, and they don't want to outsource it to another department. Again, lots of leaders are seeing an increase in employee upskilling. What I talked about. If you have a great way to track your skills, you can really upskill and you can start to uncover talent in your organization, like I just talked about with the energy example. Businesses are starting to look at internal mobility. They're starting to look at different ways to tap into their workforce. That can be current employees, that can be alumni, it could be different talent pools. But companies are starting to realize that they need to look internally first before they go external. Again, we talked to Katie Lawrence, who most of you know from SDI and from her work with Scottish Women in Technology. Katie's really passionate about skills-based hiring and about how it can reduce bias and promote inclusion. And we've seen that, we were just spent time with a customer this morning. I've seen a huge increase in internal matches because they have actually invested in internal mobility and invested in being able to tap into the workforce better. One of the examples I've seen, I won't mention it, but it was a financial services company who were, and again, this wasn't with us, but they'd made a decision on having to cut costs. And we're seeing this a lot. We're seeing a lot of redundancies across the board right now. Now, a lot of those decisions are being made in isolation. They're not being made based on that skill not being in demand or that person. They're just being made because they needs to cut a certain amount of cost. Not to say that you want to use internal mobility to look at cost cutting, but if you do need to cost cut, you can actually make a much better decision based on data and based on what's going on instead of just making hey, we're going to get those 4 departments, cut them by 30%. That doesn't actually improve the organization. It might cut a cost, but you could be letting a skills go that you actually need in other parts of the organization. Again, this is something that we're pushing the government on at the moment. We're really pushing around making it easier to hire external short-term resource. In the US and other economies, it's much easier to tap into external talent to fill these skill gaps. And we have found from this research that companies really are struggling to understand all the compliance they need to. And we have a great pool of talent in the UK. The UK and even in Scotland, great talent, but not all of that wants to work full time. And we need to make it easier for companies to fill these skill gaps. And this is where we're seeing the number one area where companies are hiring short-term resource is within AI and machine learning. Again, we see that on a daily basis on our platform. But it's interesting that companies are looking at contingent resource. But more and more and more, they're having a look at outsources. They're having a look outside the UK. And we need to make it easier to be able to tap into that talent pool that might not want a full-time job. A full-time job is not for everybody. 47% of graduates at the moment go into a freelance job instead of a permanent job now. That's a fact. And we're going to see a huge rise now in the need for contingent talent because companies are unfortunately going to continue to cut cost bases. They are going to think that generative AI can replace a lot of their jobs. The reality is that's not going to be the case. The reality is generative AI tools can replace certain tasks for sure, but you can't just get rid of 200 people and think the claim Klarna made and think that is just going to replace. You can have a tool that's going to replace hundreds and hundreds of people. Again, I don't believe that's the case. A lot of companies are asking the government to simplify how they hire contingent workforce. National insurance is not helping us either. As companies are making more redundancies and they're looking to change their fixed cost base by cutting costs because of the national insurance increase. So again, this is not about being political, but I think there's certain things we can do in the UK to make it easier for companies to plug those talent gaps that obviously exist. So in terms of the here and the now and where this is going to go, there is a tech skill shortage, and it is specifically acute at the moment within data and AI. It's going to cause delays lost revenue, and companies need to look at both internal upskilling and external talent to plug those skill gaps. For me, it's a triumvirate. Yeah. What skills do we have internally that we can match the demand that we have right now? What people do we have in our organization whose skills and tasks are becoming less in demand? And what can we do to upskill those people? And then third, how can we tap into different talent pools? And I don't mean just a day rate contractor. You tap into interns from a data lab, tap into PhD students, tap into you're a consultant living in another part of the world that's worked with McKinsey, for example, and is looking for a short-term gig. There is lots of different talent pools out there that you can tap into. Hidden talent, it's called often, but there is talent all over the world and all over the UK we can tap into if we think more than just the normal, hey, we have a skill gap, let's create a full-time job requisition and let's fill it that way. Okay, cool. That's how we've done it for the last 150 years. And that might make sense in this scenario. But are you going to get the budget signed off? Is there another way to do this work? And that is the way that as leaders we kind of need to think about skill gaps moving forward. Skill gaps ain't going to get better, but how we respond to those skill gaps and what we put in place now is going to help. Obviously, there's a lot of government level around, around changing the skills at a school level and everything else. All that should be applauded, and that is right. But if you're running a program or you're running an IT department or a data team and you have a demand right now and you're under pressure to deliver, then you need an answer now. You don't need an answer in 5, 6, 7 years. You need an answer now. And so much so that this is, Harvard Business School have recently put an executive fellow, John Windsor, and all John Windsor does day in, day out is write papers and talk to large organizations in the Fortune 500 about how they need to embrace contingent and internal resource to be able to fill the skill gaps they have. This is not just a small topic. This topic is on the boardroom in most major companies. It's in in the universities at some of the biggest universities in the world. This is a big topic that needs to be looked at. And again, it can be done very, very quickly. The way to think about becoming skills powered and filling skill gaps is to start small. Don't try and swallow the whole whale at once. Bite at a time. Start with internal mobility, external hiring, or upskilling. Pick something, and then really start to look at what roles can we taskify? What skills do we have? What can we do to then tap in to fill the skill gaps when we know what they are and we know what's driving them? And that's the simplest place to start. Start small, get executive buy-in. Don't try and do it all at once. But if you can show one thing works, like one of the examples I've talked about a lot, it's not a data example, but it's a cybersecurity example. But BT, so I know the head of the talent acquisition. She's based in Birmingham, and she told me this a few years ago. They were getting requisitions all the time to hire full-time cybersecurity experts. They were junior cybersecurity experts. They were ranging from like 25 to 30 grand a year. They couldn't find anybody, but it was like an entry-level job, but they couldn't get graduates or enough graduates in. So they set out and creating an upskilling program where they took people who were working on the in the shops for BT or EE shops mainly, and they asked them who wanted to reskill in cybersecurity. They told them what the earning potential could be, and they went through a 12-month cycle. And they now do that, and they do that with data skills, and they do it with everything else. But BT now, when they have a skill set that they have a skill gap, their first port of call now is to create an upskilling program or a reskilling program, I suppose you would call it. And they look at what resource they already have and see whether they can tap in. It's a lot easier to replace someone working in a phone shop than it is a cybersecurity or a data analyst. And again, it's a great retention tool as well because they've got the domain knowledge. So start small and and pick an area, pick one of those three areas I mentioned, and get some exec buy-in, test it out, iterate it, and see where it goes from there. All right, I did promise there'd be another bit to download the report. So as I said, if you would like to if you like to read the full report, you can click here, and I'm happy to get into any questions.
Cool. Thanks, Rich. That's great. So we do have a few questions actually. There was a couple that came in earlier and one that's just landed. So we'll go for the one that's just come in first. So that's from Emaine. Thanks very much for sending that in. So the question is, from all these stats, do you have any analysis regarding university researchers struggling to do the move to industry, and what are the skills that we should highlight in a CV for saying that we can also work on a real life problem?
Yeah, it's a good. I actually done a session a couple of Saturdays ago on this. Well, a lot of students in Aberdeen. Like I think working on a real life project with a company is the way to do it, right? It doesn't need to be live. But like whether it's an internship or whether it's a project, being able to show that you can work with an organization on a project is a great way to be able to move beyond just the research part. A lot of companies will struggle to take the analytical and research part. How do you apply that into a real problem? And that's when using more mediums than a CV is a way to go, right? So again, if you've worked on a project and you've got feedback from, you can put that in GitHub, you can put it on, you can put it on a YouTube, you can turn it into a Loom video. But I think how do you show beyond just words in a CV that you have the critical thinking or the prioritization needed to work at a company, and being able to highlight the skill that way, right? Be able to highlight what you've done, whether it might be a recommendation from someone you've worked with. But my feedback would be definitely your work on a hackathon or work on a project or work on something with an end organization that takes it above the theoretical aspect of it. And again, it might just be you go to a hackathon with a company and you kind of get some feedback from that. JP Morgan, for example, I mentioned them twice. I should be getting JP Morgan royalties, but they do great hackathons. Skyscanner are doing a great thing around that as well at the moment. So I think really be curious, go out and take take advantage of some of the things that are going on in Scotland just now around this, and then document it. And I think the document is key. Take it beyond the CV, post about it on LinkedIn, create a video, create a link on your CV that takes to that video, take it above and beyond just the words in the paper. I think is the best way to do it.
Perfect. Yeah, I like that. Hopefully that answers your question. I mean, right, and then one other one. If anyone's got any further questions, just feel free to pop them in that Q&A. By the way, but I'm going to jump in with another one that came in earlier. So, one's just around. I think one of the data points was talking about how basically every organization that we spoke to is trying to implement skills-based hiring and agrees it's kind of a good idea, but very few have actually fully implemented it. So where are organizations getting stuck? What's the blocker that's causing this?
Yeah, very few have. I think the book that I mentioned that it's really written very much on the Standard Chartered and how their journey on it. And it's written, one of the co-writers of the book is the head of people at Standard Chartered. Very few companies have done it. I think where it tends to go wrong is companies tend to start it from an HR or people perspective, and they push it out to the whole organization too quickly, and they try and just mandate it. We have seen that specifically tech teams, push back on that. They want to build their own solution. They want to be part of the solution. They don't want to be mandated in what to do, especially when it's around technology, because most of the solutions around skills-based are a technology. So it is a platform, it is a solution, it's software at the end of the day. Tech people really don't like being told to use software when they've not been involved. So I think one of the key things that's holding it up is that that there's a bit of politics at play and really owns it. And what we're seeing is that the tech leaders more and more and more, they want to own it and they want their own solution. And they don't want to be mandated because they believe that their skills, the skills within a technology organization are very, very different. And I would agree it, you know. You're running a sales organization and a data analytics team is not the same thing. You know, the skills, the people, the project, it's just not the same. So by trying to mandate, and that's when the frameworks come in, right? You know, there's not a skills framework that works across an organization yet. And I think that's where companies are going wrong. They're trying to put a skills framework out. I mentioned Sophia. Sophia is the skills framework for the information age. It's only for tech teams. Can't use it for anything else. But it's great for a tech team. Wouldn't work for a sales team. So I think there's still this kind of shift in organizations around who owns the skills conversation. And it should, in my head, it should be more department led instead of it being a one size fits all.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you only had to see the discussion going on at Transform with David Gow from Arnold Clark to see kind of how difficult that is. We probably could add a whole panel discussion just around how to standardize skills and whether Python was a skill or not. So, yeah,
My answer to that, I was talking to Craig about this the other day. Python is a skill depending on what framework you use, right? You can't say Python is not a skill. It is a skill if you're using a certain skills framework. If you're using Sophia, it's not.
mm,
So again, it's really about what, but it's like it's about a football team. If you're in a skills framework, that's your skills framework. But if you go to another organization, they've got another one, and it's so we could do a standardized version, but again, how do you create a standardized version across millions of companies?
yeah.
Impossible.
And how do you factor in the various levels and the actual applications of how it was worked on
And how
again,
the skills change, right? How quickly the skills change. Sophia version 9 is out now, and it's probably out of date already.
yeah,
It'll be out of date every 3 months. The way that skills are developing right now, and the way that technology is developing, you can't. You need to be agile. You need to kind of keep in front of it.
yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay. Well, we're coming up to 20 to 1. I know, Rich, you've got a train to go and catch. So if there's not more
Unfortunately,
questions, we'll probably wrap things up there. But yeah, just a big thank you to everyone for coming and yourself, Rich, for taking us through that presentation. If anyone would like the recording of this to share with colleagues or anything, let us know. I think it's all been recorded. So happy to share that with you. And obviously the report's there on the website as well. We'd love for you to download it and let us know what you think.
yeah, I'm more happy as well as if any organisations want to have a chat and dig in more in this topic. I'm more than happy to jump the call and talk about some of our experiences and some of the things that we're seeing around becoming skills based and how do you fill skill gaps. More than happy to do that.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks very much, Rich.
All
And
right. Thanks,
everyone,
Sean.
cheers. Bye bye.